The boy who loved the man in black. A burst of static preceded that iconic baritone, Johnny Cash's voice resonating through the cramped kitchen. Folsom Prison Blues blared from the countertop radio, arresting 9-year-old Sam Johnson mid-bite. Spoon suspended, eyes alight, he stood mesmerized, picturing the man in black performing just for him in their humble Oklahoma dwelling. He knew the song intimately, each chord and harmonica wail etched in his memory. Seeing Cash live, awash in stage illumination, had become his singular obsession. Memphis beckoned. That was the venue. Memphis, Tennessee. Sam, breakfast first. His mother, Sarah, called from the pantry, her words struggling against the musical tide. Mom! It's about trains! Sam shouted back, completely lost in the sound. He tapped a rhythm, imagining the locomotive's pulse, the engine's clang, the boundless promise of the rails. The concert, a mere 2 days away, had been the family's focus for weeks. Thomas, his father, had even pulled extra hours at the garage to cover the cost of tickets and lodging. The following day became a whirlwind of anticipation. Empty suitcases sprawled across Sam's bed, mouths gaping, awaiting their contents. Sarah, with meticulous care, folded clothes, while Thomas conducted a thorough inspection of their aging Ford Fairlane. Sam, practically vibrating with excitement, gathered his most cherished items, a dog-eared copy of Tom Sawyer, a collection of smooth, gray creek stones, and a faded magazine photo of Johnny Cash. This he carefully tucked between the book's pages, a silent pledge to return it bearing an autograph. Trip day dawned crisp and radiant. Sam, awake before sunrise, zipped around the house like a hyperactive hummingbird. The car was crammed, a cooler separating Sam and his younger sister, Lily, in the back. Thomas ignited the engine, which coughed then roared to life, and they departed, leaving their small hometown shrinking in the rearview. A ribbon of asphalt unfurled before them, the highways stretching into the distance under the summer heat. Oklahoma dissolved into Arkansas, the scenery morphing from flatlands to verdant hills. Sam, glued to the window, soaked in the kaleidoscope of passing trees and fields. His questions flew rapid fire. Are we almost there? What's Memphis like? Think Johnny Cash likes fried chicken? Sarah chuckled softly. Patience, Sam. We'll arrive before you know it. And I wouldn't bet against it. Lily, typically a chatterbox, sat unusually silent, her face ashen. My tummy hurts, Mommy. She whimpered, clutching her middle. Sarah reached back, her touch gentle against Lily's forehead. You feel a little warm, sweetie. Try to rest. The remainder of the drive carried a heavy air of apprehension. Lily dozed fitfully, punctuated by soft groans. Thomas pressed on, his brow creased with worry. Sam, usually buzzing with exhilaration, felt a cold fist clench in his gut. What if Lily were too sick to attend the show? What if they had to abort the journey? The prospect was devastating. He peered out the window, the once enticing hills now appearing bleak, the sky losing its luster. Memphis, and the man in black, felt impossibly distant. Sunbeam Hotel blues. The Ford's taillights painted long streaks of crimson across the Mississippi, staining the inky waters below. Ahead, Memphis beckoned, a mirage of neon promising respite. Sam, pressed against the cool window, idly traced patterns in the fog forming there. An unusual silence had settled over his parents since they'd crossed into Tennessee. The air inside the car felt heavy, like the dense humidity clinging to the metal shell. Almost there, sport. His dad, Samuel, Sr., announced, a false cheerfulness lacing his tone. Ready to hear the man in black? Sam's spirits lifted, conjuring the iconic image of Johnny Cash. He envisioned the baritone rumble, the twang of the guitar, that undeniable magnetism. You bet, he replied, bouncing, his weariness momentarily forgotten. The Sunbeam Hotel proved a far cry from the glittering haven Sam had imagined. It was a tired, 2-story affair, its paint peeling like old sunburn, the neon sign stuttering its name in fits and starts. The parking lot was largely deserted, save for a couple of weather-beaten trucks. His mom, Sarah, released a soft sigh. Well, Samuel, Sr. offered, straining for optimism. It's just for one night. Location, 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 right? Close to Beale Street, that's all that counts. The lobby reeked of stale cigarettes intertwined with a faint, antiseptic odor. A solitary fly buzzed aimlessly around a grimy lamp. Behind the check-in desk, a man sporting a pencil-thin mustache and a guarded expression flipped through a magazine. He didn't acknowledge them. Johnson, Samuel, Sr. declared, sliding the reservation form across the worn surface. We have a room booked. The man finally glanced up, his gaze lingering a beat too long on Sam and his mom. A humorless smile played on his lips. Johnson, eh? Let's have a look. He shuffled through a stack of papers, his movements frustratingly deliberate. Sorry, pal, no reservation under that name. That's impossible. Samuel, Sr. countered, his voice taking on a sharper edge. I confirmed it just yesterday on the phone. Well, I'm staring at the ledger, and there's no Johnson. He leaned back, a knowing smirk twisting his mouth. Maybe you've got the wrong joint. A cold knot tightened in Sam's stomach. Something felt amiss. He glanced at his mom, her face etched with a worry he didn't fully grasp, yet somehow shared. He looked back at the clerk, a creeping disquiet washing over him. This wasn't a simple mistake. This felt other. His anticipation for the concert evaporated. The vibrant lights of Memphis seemed to dull, replaced by an encroaching darkness he couldn't articulate, but instinctively knew was unwelcome. Mr. Grumble's grumpy greeting. Sam bounced on the balls of his feet, clutching his Johnny Cash record tighter. The lobby smelled of stale tobacco and something vaguely floral, like potpourri that had lost its potency years ago. A lone fly buzzed lazily near a chipped ceramic ashtray on a side table. Dad approached the front desk, its surface scarred with what looked like cigarette burns. Behind it sat a man whose face seemed permanently set in a scowl. Evening, Dad said, his voice polite, extending a hand toward the reservation slip. Johnson. We have a reservation. The man behind the desk, whose name tag read B. Grimsley, didn't return the handshake. He barely glanced at the slip of paper. Instead, his eyes, magnified by thick glasses, raked over Sam, his sister Lily, and Mom, who stood a few feet back. A silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the buzzing fly. Don't have anything. Grimsley finally grunted, his voice raspy like sandpaper. He didn't bother to check the computer or flip through any papers. But the reservation. Dad stammered, his smile faltering. I spoke with someone just yesterday to confirm. Grimsley leaned back in his creaky chair, a sneer curling his lip. Things change. We're full up. He punctuated the statement with a dismissive wave of his hand. Sam felt a knot forming in his stomach. This wasn't right. He could feel it, a cold dread creeping up his spine. He looked at Lily, her eyes wide and questioning, then at Mom, whose face was slowly hardening with a familiar resolve. Full up with what? Mom asked, her voice dangerously calm. We made this reservation weeks ago. We have confirmation. Are you saying you're turning us away? Grimsley's eyes narrowed. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he picked up a tattered magazine from under the desk and began flipping through it, pointedly ignoring them. The gesture was a slap in the face, a blatant display of disrespect. Sir, this is unacceptable, Dad said, his voice rising slightly. We've driven all day. We have a right to this room. Grimsley finally looked up, his gaze hard and unwavering. I said we're full? Maybe try the Colored Traveler's Guide. Heard there's a place a few towns over. He returned to his magazine, the words hanging in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sam's heart sank. He understood now. It wasn't about being full. It was about the color of their skin. The excitement that had bubbled inside him just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a crushing wave of disappointment and anger. The Johnny Cash record suddenly felt heavy in his hands, a symbol of a country that didn't seem to want them. He stared at the floor, the worn carpet suddenly blurring through the sting of tears he refused to let fall. He just wanted to listen to his record, and now, thanks to Mr. Grumbles, he wasn't sure where they were going to sleep. A voice in the night. The muted argument near the registration desk was a knot tightening in Sam's stomach. His parents' voices, usually a warm melody, were now hushed and strained, punctuated by the sharper, clipped tones of Mr. Grumbles. Sam couldn't make out the words, but the body language was painfully clear. His mother's shoulders were slumped, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. His father, usually so jovial, stood stiffly, his jaws set. Mr. Grumbles, behind the counter, puffed out his chest, radiating an aura of stubborn disapproval. Sam felt a wave of helplessness wash over him. He'd imagined this trip, their first real vacation, so differently. He'd pictured laughter, roadside attractions, and maybe even catching a glimpse of Johnny Cash himself. Now, it felt like the dust of the Nevada desert was settling not just on their car, but on his spirit too. Suddenly, a rumble, deeper than the idling cars in the parking lot, vibrated through the small lobby. Headlights flooded the windows, momentarily blinding Sam. He squinted as a massive tour bus, painted with scenes of guitars and honky-tonks, pulled up outside. The air brakes hissed, a mechanical sigh that seemed to echo Sam's own disappointment. The door of the bus swung open with a pneumatic whoosh. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the interior lights. Tall, impossibly tall, he unfolded himself from the vehicle, a dark shape against the brightly lit doorway. A hush fell over the lobby. Mr. Grumbles, mid-sentence, choked on his words. Sam held his breath. As the figure stepped fully into the Nevada night, the porch light illuminated his face. It was lined, weathered, and instantly recognizable. The pompadour was a little less sculpted than in the pictures, the black suit a little more travel-worn, but there was no mistaking that face. It was Johnny Cash. He paused, his eyes scanning the small group gathered inside the lobby. His gaze lingered for a moment on Sam's parents, then on Mr. Grumbles, whose face had gone from florid to pale in a matter of seconds. A slow, deliberate smile spread across the man in black's face. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that seemed to fill the entire room. The man in black stands tall. Sam was a coiled spring of anticipation near the check-in, practically vibrating as he craned his neck, searching the entrance. "Mr. Cash, did the Carters even like the tickets? D'you think they'll actually show?" A low chuckle rumbled from Johnny. "I reckon they will, son. Hard to pass up a free show without a darn good reason." He leaned against a foam marble pillar, fingers ghosting over his guitar case in a silent riff. The Grand Majestic's lobby, all gleaming crystal and muted murmurs, was a world away from their rough-and-tumble travels. Then, a viper's hiss sliced through the air. From behind a colossal floral display, Mr. Grumble's voice, brittle with contempt, shattered the polite ambience. "Absolutely not. Those people will not be accommodated. The reputation, the clientele, it's unacceptable." A chill snaked down Johnny's spine. Abandoning the pillar, he moved with quiet purpose toward the source. Sam, sensing the shift, stilled his fidgeting, his youthful face creased with worry. "But Mr. Grimsley," a younger voice stammered, laced with trepidation, "they have a confirmed reservation. And they've already paid. Reservation be damned, payment means nothing. I will not have it. Void it. Reimburse them. Tell them, fabricate something about overbooking. I don't care, just be rid of them." The sheer venom dripped from Grumble's words. Johnny emerged from behind the flowers, his presence a sudden, towering storm cloud. The ornate lobby seemed to shrink, its gilded excess dwarfed by his quiet intensity. The junior clerk flinched, eyes wide with apprehension. Grumbles, however, merely puffed up his chest, face coloring with indignant rage. "Is there a difficulty here, Mr. Grimsley?" Johnny's tone was a low, gravelly drawl, laced with controlled menace. The silent melody had vanished, replaced by a deep, resonant authority that demanded compliance. Grumble stammered, eyes flitting nervously between Johnny and the petrified clerk. "Cash. I wasn't aware you were nearby. I heard quite enough. Johnny stated, his gaze unwavering. Quite enough to know you're teetering on the edge of a colossal mistake. Grumble's facade began to crack. A sheen of perspiration dotted his brow as he nervously moistened his lips. Now see here, Cash, this is purely policy. Business. Matters you simply wouldn't grasp. Johnny advanced, closing the space between them like a predator stalking prey. Sam watched, his own anger a slow burn beneath a veneer of dread. He recognized that glint in Johnny's eye. He knew that deceptively gentle tone. Someone was about to receive a harsh lesson. I understand perfectly, Mr. Grimsley, Johnny said, his voice like sharpened steel. I understand prejudice. And I understand that this nation is founded on judging a man by his actions, not his skin. Now, are you going to honor that family's booking, or are we going to have a significant problem? Respect for all. The silence hung thick and heavy after Grumble's refusal. Sam felt his face burn, shame mixing with a boiling anger he'd never known. He squeezed his mother's hand, his knuckles white. Even the faint scent of her lavender perfume couldn't soothe the tremor that ran through him. Johnny Cash, who had been leaning against the counter, straightened up. His presence, already imposing, seemed to grow, filling the small lobby. The soft glow of the overhead light caught the silver buckle on his belt, drawing Sam's eye for a fleeting moment. Mr. Grumbles, Cash said, his voice low and steady, like the rumble of a distant train. These folks need a place to stay. You got empty rooms. I saw the register. Grumbles huffed, his jowls shaking. Got my reasons, Mr. Cash. Business is business. Business is built on respect, Mr. Grumbles, Cash countered, his eyes unwavering. Respect for all. Last I checked, that was still the bedrock of this country. These are good people. Tired people. They deserve a clean bed and a good night's rest, same as anyone else. Sam watched, mesmerized. The air crackled with unspoken tension. He could almost taste the metallic tang of fear in his mouth. Grumbles shuffled his feet, avoiding Cash's gaze. The old man's hands fluttered like trapped birds. Now, see here, Mr. Cash. See here yourself, Grumbles, Cash interrupted, his voice hardening. I'm not asking you to do me a favor. I'm telling you what's right. What's decent. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Are you telling me decency ain't part of your business plan? A long, drawn-out sigh escaped Grumble's lips. He looked defeated, his shoulders slumping. He glanced at Sam, then at his mother and father, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. All right, he muttered, reaching under the counter. Keep your shirt on. He fumbled with a key, its brass tarnished with age, and slapped it down on the counter with a dull thud. Room 12. Back of the building. Don't expect room service. Cash picked up the key, the metal glinting in his large hand. He turned to the Johnsons, a genuine smile gracing his face. Room 12 it is. You all get some rest now. He extended the key to Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson took it, his hand trembling slightly. Thank you, Mr. Cash, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We won't forget this. No need to thank me, Cash replied, clapping Mr. Johnson on the shoulder. Just pay it forward. That's all. As they turned to leave, Sam looked back at Johnny Cash, an overwhelming sense of gratitude washing over him. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in his throat. He just nodded, a silent promise to remember this night, this act of kindness, for the rest of his life. The linoleum felt cold beneath his worn shoes as he followed his parents toward room 12, leaving the scent of stale tobacco and simmering prejudice behind them. A room with a view of hope. The key rattled in the lock, a tiny symphony of liberation. Martha pushed the door open, and the aroma of lemon polish and faintly stale cigarette smoke washed over them. It wasn't home, but after the chill of the lobby, it felt like a sanctuary. Well, hallelujah, she breathed, stepping inside. The room wasn't lavish. 2 double beds, covered in chenille spreads the color of faded peaches, dominated the space. A small, scarred dresser stood against one wall, and alone, buzzing fluorescent light fixture cast a harsh glow. But the window! It was huge, almost a wall in itself, offering a panoramic view of the sprawling cityscape that stretched towards the distant, hazy mountains. Sam rushed to the window, his earlier gloom instantly forgotten. "Wow!" he whispered, pressing his nose against the cool glass. The streetlights twinkled below like fallen stars. He could see cars like tiny, luminous beetles crawling along the avenues. It's beautiful," he said, turning back to his parents, his eyes shining. Martha began unpacking their small suitcase, carefully laying out clothes on one of the beds. Samuel Sr. stood by the door, his shoulders still tense, his gaze fixed on the hallway outside. The encounter with the clerk had shaken him more than he let on. Sam, however, bubbled with renewed energy. He bounced on the edge of the nearest bed, testing its give. "Thank you," he said, his voice unusually soft. His parents looked at him, surprised. "For everything," he elaborated, meeting their eyes. "For not giving up. And for Johnny Cash." He couldn't articulate the strange mix of gratitude and awe he felt towards the singer, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that something significant had shifted tonight. Samuel Sr. finally cracked a small smile. "You're welcome, son. We just want you to see the world, and know it's yours as much as anyone else's." Martha smoothed a crease from her dress. "Now let's get settled. The concert's tomorrow night, and we want to be ready." Sam grinned, the earlier shadow of the lobby completely banished. He walked back to the window, his reflection superimposed on the glittering cityscape. Johnny Cash standing up for them, giving them this opportunity, it felt like a promise. A promise that the world, despite its ugliness, also held the potential for kindness, for justice, for music that could shake the very foundations of prejudice. He imagined the concert hall, the roar of the crowd, the deep rumble of Johnny Cash's voice filling the space. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, he could almost hear it, a song of hope echoing in the room with a view of a brighter tomorrow. He couldn't wait. A wave and a dedication. The heavy humidity pressed down like a damp blanket, forecasting another day of sweltering heat. Sam, practically vibrating with nervous excitement, had arrived ridiculously early, hoping for a glimpse, a stray syllable, anything. He staked out a spot near the stage entrance, feigning interest in a dogged paperback, though his gaze flitted about like a trapped bird. Then, there he was. Johnny Cash. Taller in person than Sam had envisioned, his face a roadmap of etched lines that whispered tales of hard-won battles and unvarnished truths. He was dressed unassumingly in a dark suit, devoid of ornamentation, radiating an understated power. A tight knot of men, likely handlers, shadowed him, yet Cash seemed miles away, his gaze fixed on some unseen horizon. Sam's heart leaped into his throat. He yearned to shout, to gesticulate wildly, to somehow acknowledge the legend, but trepidation paralyzed him. He was just a kid, an insignificant speck. What would the man in black think? Then, Cash's eyes made a slow pass across the small gathering, and for a breathtaking instant, they connected with Sam's. A fleeting, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips as he offered a slow, deliberate wave. A humble gesture, yet it detonated in Sam's soul like a sonic boom. Johnny Cash had noticed him. He had been acknowledged. The ensuing concert became a whirlwind of amplified sound and vibrant light. Swept along by the collective fervor, Sam belted out every lyric, his voice raw with uncontainable emotion. He felt inextricably linked to the music, a profound empathy for the stories Cash spun. The songs spoke of trials overcome, of finding solace in hardship, and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. Later, the stage lights dimmed, and a reverent hush descended upon the audience. Cash stood solitary in the spotlight, his guitar shimmering beneath the stark illumination. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the speakers. "I want to dedicate this next song," he rumbled, his voice a low, gravelly cadence. "To anyone who's ever stood their ground for what's right, even when faced with adversity. To those who champion justice and equality, regardless of the price." He struck the opening chords of Ring of Fire. But the tempo was a deliberate, almost mournful crawl. The song transformed into a battle cry, an invocation to action. Sam felt a rush of conviction, a burgeoning belief that he, too, could effect change, that he, too, could stand firm in his beliefs. He scanned the faces around him, seeing mirrored in them a fierce resolve, a burgeoning hope. The wave, the dedication, it all fused into a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer just an anonymous kid. He was part of something far larger, something meaningful. Heroes in many forms. The Mississippi River blurred into a silver ribbon as they drove east, leaving Memphis behind. The Cadillac hummed, a steady rhythm against the backdrop of gospel music on the radio. Pa, usually a man of few words, kept glancing at Ma in the rearview mirror, a small smile playing on his lips. Ma just hummed along, her gaze fixed on the passing fields of cotton, their white bowls like fallen snow. Sam was wedged between them, notebook open on his lap. He wasn't writing, though. Instead, he replayed the scene in the hotel lobby, the clerk's sneer, the coldness in his eyes. Then, Johnny Cash, a giant of a man with a voice that could shake the earth, stepping in. Sam scribbled a line. Heroes don't always wear capes, sometimes they wear black. He looked up. Pa, why did that man treat us like that? Pa sighed, his smile fading. Son, some folks just ain't learned to see past the color of a person's skin. It ain't right, but it is. Ma reached over and squeezed Sam's hand. But there are good people too, Samuel. People who know right from wrong, no matter what. Sam thought about Johnny Cash. He'd seen him on television, a distant figure on a stage. But last night, he was real, standing up for them, offering a kind word and a warm place to sleep. He didn't have to help us, Sam said, more to himself than anyone else. No, he didn't, Pa agreed. But he did. That's what matters. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sam watched the colors shift, his mind still swirling with the day's events. He thought about the stories he'd read in school, stories of brave men and women who fought for what they believed in. He wondered if he could ever be that brave. He looked down at his notebook and wrote another line. Being brave isn't about being big or strong, it's about doing what's right even when it's hard. The Cadillac sailed on through the twilight, the world outside growing darker. But inside the car, a different kind of light was growing, a light of understanding, of hope, and a burgeoning sense of responsibility. Sam knew he couldn't change the world overnight, but he could start with himself. He could be kind, he could be fair, and he could stand up for what he believed in, just like Johnny Cash. He closed his notebook, a small smile mirroring the one he'd seen on his father's face. He still had a lot to learn, but he knew one thing for sure: heroes came in many forms, and even a kid from Mississippi could be one of them.